You were not meant to be a slave to the grind. You were not meant to trade your life force for money. You can escape gravity. You can unlock your life. You got this. Let's go.
Hello and welcome to Unlock Your Life. I'm your host, Jennings Smith. Just got back off of a 3-week trip. I was in Nashville for a week at a conference. Then I went over to Ohio. I flew back, immediately got in the car, drove to Ohio with my wife and kids to see my in-laws. From there, we went over to Cedar Point, which is an amusement park up in Ohio, and then over to Michigan to a camp called Life Action Camp, which is basically like a summer camp for your kids, but it's a whole family camp. So, they have morning sessions where everyone attends. They have a lot of stuff for kids to do. They got a boat, tubes, they got a lake. They got this big blob thing that you can jump on and bounce your kid off of, activities. It's a lot of fun. Back at home, getting into the swing of things. And I wanted to talk to you about something that has been on my heart because this last, 2 weeks, I kind of felt like I was in the promised land to some degree. And that's going to make sense here in a minute. So I'm going to tell you a little story. Maybe you're familiar with this, but this story is when you've probably heard of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt, right? They were slaves for 400 years in Egypt. They crossing the desert. And if you look at a map, it doesn't take 40 years to cross the desert from Egypt over to, modern day Israel. And so we know that the Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years. Why did it take them so long? And this story out of Numbers actually kind of talks about that and why it took them so long to get there, because it really didn't. Fairly quickly, they were on the border of the promised land. And Moses picked out 12 people to go into the promised land. He said, all right, everybody pick one guy from their tribe. There were 12 tribes of Israel. One guy to go out there and we're going to, explore the land. Go out there and scout it and tell us, is it good? Is it good land? Do their crops grow there? Do they have, fruit and trees? And do their cities, are they fortified? Or we want to take over this land. God has promised us this land. So how difficult is that going to be? And is this even land that we want? Is it good land? So these 12 guys, they sneak over the border and go into the land of Canaan, and they see a lot of stuff, and they see, wow, the soil is great. There is a lot of, animals and livestock. There's fruit trees here. There's grapes, there's pomegranates. And this is actually really, really, really good place for us to live. And they spend about a month in exploring the countryside, and they come back and they tell the people, okay, this is what we saw. And they actually it says they bring back a grape branch, and it was so heavy, one cluster of grapes. So they had to have 2 men and a pole between them to carry this cluster of grapes into the camp. They're saying this place is overwhelmingly good. There's so much food here, abundance. This is going to be the promised land. This is going to be an amazing place to live. And it fits the criteria of what God promised us that we were going to get. But there is one problem. The people there are huge, right? They say that some of them are giants, actually. So I don't know what they mean by giants, but they say that we were like grasshoppers in their sight. So we got to assume these people were a lot bigger than they were, and they were numerous. And they said their cities are not open. They're fortified. They've got walls built around all their cities, and they are a very, very strong people. And Caleb and Joshua, 2 of the spies, they kind of spoke up and silenced the people and said, we should go and take possession of the land because we certainly can do it. But the other 10 guys were saying, no, we can't attack these people. They're stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites fear about the land they had explored. They say, there's just too many. There's giants. They're fortified cities. This isn't going to work. And so what do the people do who have, been traveling? Remember, these people were slaves, right? Slaves in Egypt, getting whipped, getting beaten, getting murdered, worked to death, building, maybe the pyramids. I don't know what they were doing in Egypt, but they were slaves. And they say, oh, if only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is God bringing us into this land only to let us fall by the sword? Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt. And they each said to each other, we should choose a new leader and go back to Egypt. So why am I getting into this story? What does this have to do with anything? Well, I want to make the point that the Israelites would rather go back to slavery in Egypt than to push through a hard thing. They had to push through a hard thing. They had insurmountable odds against them. They were going to have to fight battles. They were going to have to face giants. They were going to have to, scale cities and wage war. They were definitely faced with a daunting task. However, they'd been promised that they were going to win. They were going to be promised that they were going to get the land, but they didn't believe it, right? They didn't have faith. And so what ended up happening was, when Moses and God saw what was happening, he basically made them wander in the desert for another, 30 whatever years until that generation had died off. Their children and their grandchildren and Caleb and Joshua were able to enter the promised land, but because of their lack of faith, because of their inability to push through a hard thing and to say, we can do this, we're going to enter the promised land, they essentially wandered the wilderness for the rest of their lives until that generation had died off. Then and only then were they able to enter the promised land. And they did win. They did take it over. They did, overcome their enemies and take over the promised land. And so I want to draw the analogy because I talked to a lot of people, and this is something that definitely was a big part of my life, where it was like, I was living in a sort of slavery. Now, I'm not going to compare my situation or maybe your situation to slavery in Egypt or modern day slavery that we're faced. But when you're doing something that you don't want to do, right? Day in, day out, grinding it out 40, 50, 60 hours a week, you're working maybe for somebody else. Maybe you're working for yourself, but there's no end in sight. It's just kill and eat. And you're not actually building something that can generate freedom, that can generate passive income, that can generate wealth. You're doing this. And why are you doing this? Well, for me, I was doing it because it was easy, right? I mean, it wasn't easy, but it was what I knew. And it was what I was comfortable with. And I thought, I can make a living for my family doing this. Nobody else is going to pay me this amount of money to do anything else. So I kind of have to do this. I have to build houses. I have to renovate houses. Or if you're maybe out there flipping houses or whatever you're doing, it's like, it's not great, but it pays the bills. This is the only skills I have. And then you start to look at the scariness on the other side, right? The giants you're going to face, the obstacles you're going to face. And you basically make a conscious or unconscious decision that I would rather stay here in something that sucks, that's something that's not ideal, something that really isn't serving my goals or purposes and really doesn't have an end game. But I'm going to stay here because that's too scary. I'm going to stay here because that's too hard. I'm going to stay here because what if I fail? What if I don't make it? What if it doesn't work out the way I hoped? And then I'm going to look stupid, or I'm going to look foolish, or it's just I'm going to go bankrupt, or I'm going to go broke, or whatever it is. And I want to make a side note here. I'm not advocating for anybody to irresponsibly go out there and quit their job and go whole hog into some cockamamie idea because you're sure it's going to work. However, you can face the first battle, right? You can take the first step. If you're not willing to take that first step and step out in faith, the second step is never going to be there. You're never going to have the opportunity or option to take the second step. And so many people never take the first step. I mean, what are these giants? Well, for me, it was, how can I find a deal? How do I even know what a good deal is? I don't know how to underwrite a deal. I don't know, how much I should or shouldn't pay for an apartment complex. Even if I did find a good deal, I couldn't get the loan. Even if I could find a good deal and I could get the loan, I still don't have the down payment. Even if I did all that, I don't know how to operate the deal. And I don't know how to actually make it make money. All these things were giants that were, walled, fortified cities that sort of kept me in the desert, kept me wandering, really for 35 years, just kind of existing, right? Not living into faith of, hey, there is a better way. Maybe God has something more for me in my life. And so as I reached this precipice and as I got to the point where it's like, I've got to make a change. I've got to do something different, because if I don't, I'm going to be 70 years old and I'm still going to be swinging the hammer. or, meeting the crews on site and trying to scrape together every, $10,000 a month to subsist and to provide for my family. I'm not going to be able to, figure out my kids' college. I'm not going to be able to retire. I mean, yeah, maybe I'll pay off my house, but, I will not have the freedom to live the way I want to and also to give the way I want to. And so I've got to make a change and I got to do something scary. And so if you're in this position, right, if you're doing something that you don't like, you don't love, I mean, it could be a whole gambit of things, but that if you could make the leap, right, and buying commercial real estate, buying assets that could pay you every month, buying assets that when you're, 50 or 60 or 70 years old are going to be worth double or triple or quadruple what they're worth now. Plus you could pay them off passively through your tenants paying rent. It's a good idea. If you're listening to this podcast, this is probably something that you want to do. And I need you to look at yourself like I looked at myself and think, what is holding me back? For me, something that was really helpful was to do a thought audit, just to dump down all of the things that I was afraid of. I just listed 4 or 5 of them. What am I afraid of? This is going to happen. That could happen. And when you put that stuff on paper, it really kind of quantifies it. And you're able to see, hold on, there's a way to overcome that. Or that's not even a valid fear. Or what if this happened? Or what if that happened? So let me break that down. I don't know what a deal is. Okay, well, how do I learn what a deal is? Well, there's courses out there. There's analyzers out there. I found something on the internet for $1,000 and it was a 100 video course on how to analyze multifamily deals. And I went through it. By the time I got to the end of that, I had a pretty decent grasp on the fundamentals of how to do this. Okay, well, how do I get a loan? Well, there's 2 ways to get a loan. You can go get owner financing. If the seller is going to let you put down 20 or 30%, he might be willing to hold the mortgage. A lot of times he's not, or he can't because he has a mortgage on it or he doesn't want to do that. So if he doesn't want to do that, well, in commercial, you're allowed to bring on a partner who can help you qualify for that loan. So that even though your financial wherewithal may not be the strongest, if you have somebody in your ring that can sign for you and sign with you and be part of it and obviously get compensated for that, that is an overcomable problem. That's what I did. I mean, the very first deal I did was a small deal, 12 unit, and the guy did owner finance 70% of the mortgage. But the second deal, they wouldn't give me owner financing. And I had to find a loan sponsor. I had to connect with somebody. And so I did. I went to conferences. I went to meetings. I made phone calls. I worked my butt off. I built relationships. I called people. I texted people. And I found someone that could help me do that. And I built a relationship with them. And we closed 5 or 6 deals together when I was getting started because I just couldn't get those loans on my own. Going to problem 3. What about down payment money? Well, it doesn't have to be your money. If you want to buy something with no money down, well, most of the time you're going to have to put some money down, but it doesn't have to be your money. And in my case, it wasn't that I had millions of dollars in the bank and I just didn't want to put it down. I didn't have it. I did not have the wherewithal to put that down. And even now, as I'm looking at bigger and bigger deals, it's like I don't have that liquidity to put that down. And if I did, then I'd be immediately broke. And so is that the wisest use of my resources? So how do I find that money? Are there people that want to get into real estate and invest in real estate that they understand all this stuff and they understand the tax advantages and why it's good, but they need somebody to run it for them. They need somebody to analyze the deal for them. They need somebody to operate it and run point on that deal. And if they can connect with that person, they will leverage their money to get into that deal and unlocking that piece. Also finding other people that could raise money for me. If I had a large raise, let's say I had to raise $2 million. Well, I didn't feel confident raising $2 million at the time. So who can help me? Who can take on 500 grand? Who can take on $1 million? I can raise, $1,500,000 and we can get this deal across the table. But there is a way, right? There's a way. And as I took these steps into the promised land, the giants fell, the enemies fell, the walls tumbled down. And what seemed so impossible, 5 years ago has now become a reality. Because when I was at this camp and when I was in Ohio and even when I was in Nashville at this conference, the business kept marching on with or without me, right? I made a list of all the things that got accomplished over the last 2 weeks. So here's what got done with my absence. So our management company signed 11 renewals at higher rates, and they signed 6 new leases on 2 properties that we have in Illinois and Georgia. Yaden and Crystal, who's my cousin, my partner, and Stacy, my executive assistant, they got our Monk's Corner properties at the 99% occupied, a 76 unit and a 19 unit. We've been at 90, 91%. They signed a bunch of leases. We ended up getting multiple offers on our 34 unit, and we're accepting one of those offers. It was a good offer. We ended up getting a purchase and sale contract on our 84 unit that we're selling in Georgia. So we negotiated the contract, and we're hopefully signing the PSA this week. I bought a single family house in Illinois for $30,000, and I sold it for $60,000 owner financed. They put down $3,000 and they're making monthly payments. I'm holding a 30-year mortgage while doing no repairs. I found a local person to sell it for me. She got the job done. She collected the check. She got the contract signed, mailed me the down payment. We're good to go. I had a large loan, like a hard money loan that I had put out. It got paid back in full when I was in Nashville. The buyers of our Tulsa deal, their money went hard on our 208 unit that we have for sale. They are now releasing their EMD to pay for some repairs, which is further committing them to the deal. Looks like we are going to be closing. We had people joining the deal room while I was gone. I got another interest payment on another loan that I have out. 8 out of 9 of my owner finance mortgages paid their mortgage on time, which is great. I got to go chase down the last one. And this is the kind of thing that I've been building over the last 4 or 5 years so that when I go out of town, the thing keeps moving without me, right? So that I can enjoy the time with my family, so that I can enjoy the time in the promised land. And guys, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like, I understand that. And I don't want to say that everything in my life is perfect. And I mean, we've spent the last 2 years pushing really, really hard, building our teams, taking some of our property management in-house, hiring the right people. But the thing that we're working on is a better model. It's a better business model. It can be scaled. It's a simple business. Employees can be trained, or you can hire third-party management. You can control the value. If you change the profitability of an apartment complex, you change the value. Every dollar that you optimize rents or lower expenses, every dollar that you make at a 6, 7, 8 cap, I mean, that's worth $15 to $20 on your exit. And speaking of exits, number 3, you have an exit, right? Small businesses, if you're a realtor or you're a wholesaler or you're a flipper or you're an employee, you don't have a business to sell. You don't have an exit. The best you can hope for is the salary that you make every week or every month that you bring home. There is no golden parachute, right? Whereas with this, every mortgage payment you make, that mortgage balance goes down. Every time the rents tick up, your valuations go up. Every time the Fed prints money and inflates money, it works for you. Every time they lower rates, your value goes up. Every time they raise rates, it creates buying opportunities for you. I get unsolicited offers every week on my properties. And so instead of chasing the next job to kill and eat and having no business to sell at the end of the road, I am building a golden parachute that if I properly and effectively manage and put in the work for 10 years, 15 years, there's a good exit at the end of that. Time is short. Real estate is going to get more expensive. And debt is probably most likely going to become cheaper. We're seeing this. I don't know if you're following the Fed rates, but the CPI report, the inflation was 3% last month on July 15th. That's the lowest it's been in 2 years. Shoot, maybe 3 years. It's only a matter of time before they cut the rates. And when they do that, the window is going to be closing. The window for acquisitions is going to be closing. Multifamily property rates or pricing is going to keep going back up. It's on sale. Believe it or not, right now, multifamily is on sale. There is opportunity, and I'm feeling it in the market now, the urgency. People are making offers. People are moving because they know in 6 to 12 months, things could be different. In 24 months, they're going to be very different. I don't want you to be sitting in 2026, 2027, looking back and thinking back, man, look at how cheap stuff was in 2024. And I just didn't move because I was afraid to face the giants. I was afraid to take the first step into the promised land. So listen, if you want help, let's chat. You can go to whatisthedealroom.com, whatisthedealroom.com. If you go on there, you can book a call with me or Yaden, and we can talk about where you're at, what you're looking to do, and if we can help you get your first apartment complex. If you want to get into real estate investing passively, just shoot me a DM, shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Let's jump on a call, talk about where you're at, where you're going, and if I've got anything coming up that could make you some returns and get you exposure to the real estate market. Well, that's what I got for you today, guys. Hope you have a great Wednesday. That's when I'm recording it. So take some time this week to step into the promised land and unlock your life. Peace.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.